education is more recent. They have gone through the same journey that you will be undertaking now. And that was what prompted us to invite our guests for today. So I'm leaving the platform back to Mr. Balachandran and to take you ahead with, interaction with our panelists. And we are very glad to be, to have all of you at this platform today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Rita, for explaining to us what Meet the Masters is all about. So before I move forward, a very humble request to all the participants and everybody in the audience, please keep yourself on mute so that we are able to hear each other properly and clearly. So please keep yourself on mute throughout the session. We will open it when required towards the end, but as of now, please keep yourself on mute. Now, let me quickly reach out to our panel guests and introduce them. First, we have Dr. Priyamvada Chugh. Dr. Priyamvada is a cell biologist, researcher. Priyam, can you just give a hands up so that people know you are there? Dr. Priyamvada is a cell biologist researcher by training and has turned into a public health communications specialist. She has done her PhD in cervical cancer cell biology at UCL and Max Planck Institute of Molecular Cell Biology and Genetics, Dresden, Germany. Prior to this, she did her MSc from Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, Mumbai. Having picked communication and problem-solving skills during her years in the laboratories across Mumbai, Germany, and UK, she decided to apply these skills in a field where effective communication can be a deep impact, public health. She started her career with UNITAID, WHO, and is currently working as a communications manager at a global health nonprofit based in Geneva that invests in increasing access to better and more affordable treatments for everyone, everywhere. Dr. Priyamvada, with your permission, I hope it's fine if I can address you simply as Priyamvada for the rest of the evening today. Thank you. Next on line, we have Miss Ranjani Iyer. Ranjani is a Mumbai girl and is currently working as Senior Systems Engineer at Becton Dickinson Research Center, Ireland. Having completed her BTech in Biomedical Engineering from DY Patil University, India, Ranjani moved on to the US at Florida Institute of Technology to pursue her master's in Biomedical Engineering. She had the advantage of doing her own research project as part of her curriculum. Soon after completing her master's, she landed up with a job with Becton Dickinson in California as part of their R&D team. After completing a year in the US, she got a chance to relocate to Ireland as part of the Becton Dickinson Research Center, Ireland. And finally, we have Dr. Sundar Naganathan, who is a developmental biologist with a PhD in biophysics from Max Planck Institute of Molecular Cell Biology and Genetics, Dresden, Germany, and currently a postdoc research scientist at EPFL, Switzerland. Dr. Sundar has so far 11 articles published in prestigious international journals of scientific repute. He leads an initiative on career development programs for graduate students, postdocs, and young investigators. He is a much sought after speaker at global conferences on molecular and developmental biology and often visits India to address students and faculties at TIFR, NCBS, the IITs, IIS, that is Indian Institute of Science, and IMSC, Chennai. As far as future plans, he is working towards establishing his own research laboratory. So Dr. Sundar, please allow me to address you as simply Sundar for the rest of the evening, if it's fine. Thank you so much. Sincere thanks to all the three of you all for taking out time and joining us in this first session of Meeting the Masters series from Switzerland and Ireland. Thank you once again. So now, we start off the discussion. So let me start with the most basic query. Now, this is a question, what we are going to do is to ask a few questions and then I will specifically mark it to the panelists in place. So the first question is, what drew you all, in fact, all the three of you all, to biosciences, and what made you all dedicate your career to it? Dr. Priyamvada, request you to have the first shot.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much, Mrs. Rita and Mr. Bala and Perfect Career Fit for giving us this opportunity to share, our journey with all you young minds who are now about to take this journey. So thanks so much. Yeah, so what drove me to biology? I think like all of you who are really interested in biology, I was very interested in understanding how things in nature works. I had the curiosity of finding, little experiments. Loved drawing specimens in zoology, in botany. So I always had the interest in biology from my school years, which then went on to a journey which we are going to surely talk about over the next over the session. But what I can say right now is where a little bit more on where I am, and so again we would come to how I ended up here. But basically, right now I am in a little field in biology, which is more public health, and more specifically in public health communications. And here, what I can say is what made me dedicate my career to public health communications is really the power that communications has in making an impact in biology, in people's lives. So, just as an example, you even see it right now in the COVID situation, that this pandemic, this huge pandemic that we are facing, little messaging, or the message that's coming from the WHO, from the government on social distancing, what to do, what not to do. So how you say that message, in what language, in what words to the different audience can change so much. It can really change people's lives. It can actually save lives. It can really fight this pandemic. And that is the power of communications in a field like this, in public health, is what really drives me to it drove me to enter this field, and it's driving me to keep continuing and making an impact here. So yeah, with those words.
Thank you so much, Priyamvada. So can we have Ranjani? Ranjani, what has been your motivation to take the path of biosciences? If you could explain it to us. Yeah.
My answer is much in line with what Priyamvada said there as well. Right from when I was in school, I was very much interested in biology as one of my subjects, and it's the curiosity that how things work, how does it go from being such a small part of a huge thing that drives you to understand the various concepts. How did I end up in this career? So once I got into biomedical engineering, it actually opened up the whole world of medical devices for me. And with my internship in Siemens, I got to see the part of the medical device industry where you work on developing these instruments that in the end, it's always about what do you get to the customer? How is it going to help someone's life? Or it's always going to play an integral part in helping someone get better from diseases, from diagnosing someone to giving them a better way of life and help them. So that's what led me to choose and motivated me to work in R&D. And every day that I actually go to work, it's always a challenge. Like currently I'm working with leukemia and lymphoma in cancer. So you can always see how the small part you do as in developing a small product, it's always going to play a huge part for someone out there. So that's how I got into where I am.
Great. Thank you so much, Ranjani. And finally, Dr. Sundar, what made you decide to go so deep into biosciences? Please enlighten us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Bala and Mrs. Rita for this wonderful initiative. I think it's really the need of the hour. These days, students are very curious about a lot of different things. So it's our responsibility in a way to educate them in whatever way we can. So thank you very much for that. What drew me to biosciences is pretty easy to answer. I just loved biology. But I had a little problem, dilemma more to say, because I liked not only biology, but I also liked mathematics. So I was deeply in love with numbers. So I used to go really crazy with numbers in school times. But I was interested in biology as well, right? So naturally, I didn't want to become a medical doctor because there's not much mathematics, involved in it. So I decided to go for something where I could have a mixture of both mathematics or engineering, to say, and biology. So that's why I chose, biotechnology for my bachelor's. It was called industrial biotechnology. So this I did in Anna University, Chennai, but I think they renamed it as just biotechnology now. And the reason I chose biotechnology in Anna University is because they had a little bit of a research component in their program, which was not very prevalent in those times, in the early 2000s. There were only 2 or 3 institutes which had that. Now many more institutes are bringing it up. So that's one of the reasons why I chose Anna University to do my biology training. So over the years, I really enjoyed working with biology, doing little research projects here and there. We will come back to each career transition in a bit. But what is driving me to dedicate my career to it is basically the curiosity. I'm like many of you, right? So you according to me, so it's just my opinion, trying to understand how your bodies function and trying to understand your own existence is sort of the coolest job out there. So that is one of the reasons I'm dedicating my time working in biology. Specifically, I'm very interested in understanding how different organs are placed in different parts of your body. For example, why is the heart only on the left? Why is it not on the right? Why is it more towards the top of your body, not towards the bottom of your body? So how does an embryo determine these organ positions, right? So another question that really drives me to answer is each of these organs have different shapes. For example, if you take your intestine, it's very tubular in shape. If you take your brain, it has all these ingressions and depressions and so on. So how do you, if I give you a little ball and ask you to stretch and twist and bend and bring me these different shapes, how would you do that? This is, in fact, these are questions that I'm very interested in addressing. And this curiosity actually helps me to wake up every day with a lot of excitement, sometimes even at nights. So with that, I will leave it there and then we will discuss more.
Thank you so much, Sundar. That was an interesting introduction. I mean, I think I think you have set the ball rolling. Okay, so now the next query that we had for all the 3 of you all together was, the 3 of you all represent 3 different aspects of biosciences. That is research, communications, and industry. So could you tell us a little bit more about your work and how does it differ from the other 2? So for example, I would request Priyamvada to talk about her line. So Priyamvada, you could go ahead and talk about communication and tell us a little how is it different from research and industry? And then we'll move on to the other panelists. Priyamvada.
Yes. Yeah, so it's very different. And so having sort of been in the research shoes before and now transitioning to communications, maybe I can tell you a little bit on both sides, but also why I chose where I am now. So maybe I can start with how a day looks like as a communications person. And so in this time that basically I think, so there's a lot of in communications, and we can broaden this up into like what the different careers are. But as a communications person in public health, basically I spend a lot of time writing, a lot of time reading, writing about new projects. So for example, when I was working with the WHO, I was responsible for communicating externally audiences out there, the public, the governments, to be able to share with them what are these cool projects that WHO is funding, for example. So a lot of my time went in researching and reading about these projects, and then being able to write them into a form that's digestible and understandable by a wide range of audiences. So I spend basically a lot of my time writing, but there's also a lot of and writing also, in form of news press releases, so which are like a page long, blogs, or even social media messages, which is, how do you condense this whole news piece that came out there in like 280 characters, right? So being able to communicate in different ways to different audiences, I think that takes up a lot of my time. As a communication specialist, or what you also end up doing a lot is being able to communicate orally, and this is more like making pitches to journalists. So whether this is over phone or email, and telling them what school there's a news coming up, you already inform them, and then this is how articles appear in Hindu, in New York Times, in Guardian. This is how basically you give them heads up information on, this is a news that's going to come up in the next 2 days. Here's why it's important. Here's why it matters. Here's what can go out there about it, basically. So this is more like pitching. And then when I do have time in the middle, which is more to maybe expand on my communications and, on brainstorming, what are the new ways I can story tell. So for example, again, during my job at the WHO, I spent some time thinking about what are the different new ways that I can come up with to tell the same message, right? So I initiated a podcast series. So because this is targeting, travelers and people who do not have the time to go through, a long article, you come up with a 2-minute podcast that can really give that same information in a very different format. I designed some quizzes, I designed some puzzles where people could click and again, in a more interactive way, get those same messages, but in an engaging way. So this is more the creative side of things. And then, more basically coming up with all different ways to reach out to as many people as you can and get the message out there. So that's more the communications. But as a researcher, and I can tell you it was really fun too. So as a researcher, for example, when I was working at the Tata Institute in Mumbai, I spent long hours staring down the microscope, looking at little flies that you see on bananas, and finding out how the little cells in these flies, how they talk to each other, how they move. And so it's very exciting. You have a new experiment every day. You have new results that you have no idea what will, and I'm sure Sundar will have interesting stories to share in terms of research. But yeah, it was a very, very different life in terms of, it was more going deep down into one question and how you can really unravel it for the world out there for the first time ever. On the other hand, communications is a lot about a lot of broad, going through different projects. Every day is very varied. You are talking, you're discussing different news every day, and a lot more is happening very, very fast. So I think it's a very different pace.
Great. I think that was very interesting, Priyamvada. Ranjani, how would you go ahead and say that, being in the industry is different from being in the research space or the communication space? So it'll, just throw some light in terms of how do you find it being different in the industry, being part of the industry now?
Yes. So even as a part of my master's in Florida Tech, I did have the opportunity to I did my thesis where I had my own research project that I did under a PI. It was a new project for him, so it gave me the opportunity to set it up. So it was a pilot research where no work had been done before, and we were trying to work on developing a material basically for an organ implant in the human body. So the main difference that I have seen is coming from research, even to Priyamvada's point, you try to nail down on a set of questions or one single question, and you dedicate a lot of time to figure out all different types of answers that you can get. The biggest change that I noticed when you move to industry is you're basically taking all these answers that researchers have worked on and trying to see how can you make a product and translate it to a customer where you have all these answers, and you can connect it by making a product into the market that is going to answer the questions or the gaps that the customers have. The biggest example that I have right now is even working in BD. all the products that, so we work on coming up with different type of assays that test all the diseases that you send your blood to the lab, and basically they would use our assays to stain your blood and see what sort of disease outcome that you have. We also create instruments that basically use to read these diseases to give you an answer or an output. But where do we get these assays, and how do, like, we do have a team of researchers that I work with in BD, but that is coming up with all sort of different collaborations that we have with multiple labs across Europe, in the US, where they have researched on these things and they have these outputs and they have these great ideas. And then we basically take it into our industry and we commercialize it and find a way to manufacture it. So in the industry, you just go through, like, even as one role as a systems engineer now, I get to see the research part of it. I get to see the marketing part of it. I get to see how do you make it into a product. So it's very interesting when you come up with a biomedical background, because it taught me a lot of different ideas about the whole, all the aspects that go together to make one single product. It's just mind blowing on when you come back to see the amount of work that even goes into testing. So even with the COVID situation right now, BD is involved in a lot of instruments that we repurpose that can be used for the DNA and RNA testing that they're doing. So you can see that if you had it for one application, how can you change it and, like, give it for a different application within an industry, just so, because there's a gap in the market and you can help the current situation worldwide.
Great. Thank you so much, Ranjani. I mean, I think, that was a very vivid and descriptive defense of being in the industry, I would say. Okay, Dr. Sundar, how would you, differentiate between what you are doing in the area of research vis-a-vis communications and industry?
Thanks for the question. So what I would say is, being in research is quite flexible, day-to-day activities. For example, it really depends on the experiments that you're doing. You are given all the flexibility in the world to do your research. Sometimes I do experiments in the morning, sometimes in the evening, sometimes it's a very sunny day, I go to the lake and come back, and then I do my experiments. So it's very flexible career compared to being in public health communication or in an industry scenario. But at the same time, I would also like to say that even though you can call it flexible, doing scientific work is very, very rigorous, and you have to be very careful with how you design your experiments, how you interpret your experiments, and how you communicate your experiments in the form of papers and through journals and so on. So a typical day for me really involves, doing a lot of experiments, and because I come from an engineering background, I also get to work a lot with engineering students and biomedical students and so on and so forth. The other interesting thing when it comes to research is attending conferences. So as a research scientist, you get to attend a lot of conferences. So on average, I attend something like 10 to 15 conferences, international conferences a year. And usually you get to meet a lot of different people. For example, a couple of years ago, or 2 or 3 years ago, I met someone, an amazing gentleman from Belgium, who decided to use the power of smell in rats to detect tuberculosis and landmines. Okay, so it turns out that rats have the second best sense of smell in the world after elephants. So for example, elephants can detect the smell of water from kilometers away. So rats also have an incredible capacity to detect smell. And this guy, he decided to use the sense of smell of rats to figure out whether a particular patient has tuberculosis or not. Because if you have tuberculosis, you have very mild smell coming out from your mouth, which can be detected by rats, but of course we cannot detect it. So he actually went ahead and trained rats to detect tuberculosis. He's using the rats for detecting landmines in Africa. Now he's also using them for detection of survivors after a natural disaster. Okay, so that apart, this is just an example. So what you get to do is to present your work in a very nice way in conferences, and also meet a lot of different people who are working on a lot of different things. Okay, so that forms a major part of being a research scientist, apart from doing day-to-day rigorous work?
Great. Sundar, that was very interesting. I think, that example was, I'm sure not many people would have heard about it before, at least I haven't. So very interesting. Okay. So now let's move to some specific questions to each one of you all. So,
can I just add a line here?
Please.
So it's like what Dr. Sundar would do as a research, and then to take that research, we have people like Dr. Priyamvada who will communicate it to the world. And then we have Ranjani who will probably create products and then, reach out to people who will probably be using it. So they're all working, with each other in some way or the other, making an impact definitely. So what starts in a research lab reaches out to people through communication or by your writing skills and through any kind of a media, and then reaches out in the form of products when you are using it in the labs or in hospitals or any other places. And that's what the industry brings it. So, so our panel today is actually taking care of right from that curiosity of questions to communicating it to the world and to reaching out in form of products. That's what I feel that, all the three of you are doing in your own space.
That's actually very well put. And I would like to add one more point to that. And for doing any of these things, a background in biology really helps. So if you want to become a public health communication specialist, having a background in biology puts you in a very unique position, similar to how, if you want to become a biomedical engineer in an industry, again, if you have a background in biology or any field of biology, it really helps. So, just, adding on to the fact that, biology is not just going to become a medical doctor.
I think that's a very nice way of having summed it up, Rita. And, I think that was interesting. So as I mentioned before, so now let's have some specific questions. So, we'll start with Priyamvada. Priyamvada, you have had a very rich and diverse experience of, going through different institutions, countries, and careers. Was it a planned career progress, or did you sort of make these decisions as they came your way?
So no, it wasn't. But at the same time, so basically it was a lot of short-term planning, but no, like let's say, not a long-term plan. Like I did not know 15 or 10 years ago I would end up where I am right now. But at each of the points that there was a decision point, there was a lot of planning involved, or thinking involved. More than planning, it was thinking, respecting, and figuring out what is working, what's not working, what's the best thing I like here and what I don't like here. So even and there was a lot of intuition involved in sort of like sensing, trying to sense what is working. So as an example, when I basically like during my master's and during my PhD, although I did enjoy the main reason why I did my master's and my PhD was the biology and the curiosity and the love for finding something cool and new. What I was enjoying the most was to talk about that research. So whether, just as how Sundar was saying, in research, you get lots of opportunities to go out there and talk to people about your research. So I was feeling that this was becoming the favorite part of my job. Like I was really like enjoying my lab work during the day, but then the opportunity to go out there and present a poster about it, or do a chai and wine Prithvi theater about how cool the science is and how olfaction works and how flies fly, or like different biology questions out there. Just interacting with all these different age groups in form of written pieces, or in form of talking to people. This was the coolest part for me. And so this was a realization, I would say, that made me switch careers actively after my PhD. So this is where, because so far I was going a lot with the flow, but also because I was still enjoying biology. And so I was like, okay, a bachelor's, because it was the best course at that time in Delhi University. So BSc Biochemistry it is. then a master's at TIFR because it was by research. So again, and Tata Institute, it was a wonderful opportunity. So I was still enjoying the flow, and I was so that I kept going with it. But at the same time, every point I was getting the sense of, yes, actually I like communicating about this really well. And so this is where I actively moved after my PhD, where I thought, okay, I want to do communications, but where would communications make a lot of sense? And this is when, and so far I hadn't had any public health training, but the fact that it's connected to science and I can actually bring my scientific understanding to this field and may be able to make a difference, the communications will make a difference in public health so much, was the kind of realization. And so then I decided to sort of take this forward and take the first plunge into, okay, public health communications, take some of my science training, the liking for communications. So it was a lot of each step kind of figuring out what are the options and what do I do. It was a customized path, and I'm sure it's true for all of us. There's no like one size fits all approach. It's basically each of us, we encounter different options, and a lot of us are, very clear on things, because actually I really have a lot of respect for people who have really good clarity in what they want to do. But at the same time, I can definitely vouch it's been a lot of fun in exploring and figuring out what is it that I want to do next, and what is it that I'm taking from my last experience. So, yeah.
Before we move to the next panelist, Priyamvada, I would, because being from the career counseling space and having interacted with students who are much younger here and also are part of this conversation, if you can share what was your undergrad, and then what was the kind of specialization that you did in your masters, and then PhD, because it's a very broad field and it's on one topic. But if you can focus a little bit more on your undergrad and your masters, which will probably help students to also know what are the kind of options that they have, and then what led you from a decision of, okay, having a stream in PCB and then moving to undergrad and then to masters. So if you can give probably a little more input on that, probably it will add a lot of value to the younger ones who are here, who are in the 9, 10, 11, 12 background. I'm sure we have a lot of students who are college graduates also, but keeping them in mind, if you can share a little bit more.
Yeah. So again, as many of the students here, I started off with the PCMB actually. And so I had biology because I loved it, but at the same time, I did not want to close my options at all. So I kept going with maths and, okay, just because I was still trying to figure out what I want to do after my school, like class 12. And then, as I said, I went for a bachelor's, a BSc in biochemistry from Delhi University, where I chose this course, one, because it was one of the good courses, in terms of the breadth it offered. So the really cool thing about biochemistry, even though it was called BSc in biochemistry, actually we covered a lot of subjects within biology in this course. So, we had, so in the first couple of years, we even had physics, chemistry, statistics, mathematics, everything. And then as the years went, so basically in the second and third year, it started getting more specialized. But at the same time, we were exposed to a lot of biology subjects. So there was genetics, there was molecular biology, there was immunology, there was human physiology. So even as a, we got a flavor for what each of these means. And so I think sort of a little advice there is, like, I think in bachelor's, it's a great thing to be able to get exposed to what each of these subjects mean. So having as broad a course as possible really helps with that, because then it gives you the hint or insights into, okay, this is what this means and this is what I can do from here. And then, of course, as we progress in our careers, we narrow down our choices and our fields more and more. So, but after my bachelor's, I think, so in my bachelor's, I got a great foundation theoretically, which really helped me, pass a lot of entrance exams after for my master's course. And also the other thing that I found, looking back, I think which was very useful was to do summer internships. So even though there was no requirement in my bachelor's for doing a summer internship during my summer vacations, I did get a chance to, like I reached out to scientists and asked them if I could just shadow PhD students, like work with them on for a few days just to see what research was like. And so this was really helpful in making that next decision of going for a master's by research at Tata Institute. And there, I guess Tara Institute is one of the few places where it's actually a 3-year master's program in biology, where you get to spend, unlike many other master's courses where it's 2 years and it's more by theory, at the Tata Institute, it's more by research. So where you spend from day one, you're actually in a lab doing research along with your theory courses. So because I was very inclined at that point more and more to do my research, this was a way for me to sample and kind of give myself that chance of trying out research. So I think that's been sort of the direction and why I chose those two decisions.
Thank you so much, Priyamvada. So now moving next to Sundar. Sundar, you have an engineering background before you shifted to biosciences. Would you recommend the same to the students here in the audience today? And if you could sort of explain, how did it help you, and how will it help you going forward in the future too? If you could sort of help us understand that.
Yeah. So it's a small change. So even though I had an engineering background in bachelor, so I did industrial biotechnology. The engineering part was only for the first 2 years. So, and for the first 2 years, I had a lot of mathematics, physics, chemistry, electronics, electrical engineering. I even learned carpentry, and so on and so forth. And the final 2 years, the third and the fourth year, we were introduced to a lot of biology. So we did not go deep into any biology field. So we got introduced to biochemistry, plant biology, protein engineering, etc., etc. Okay. So now at the end of my BTech, this was a 4-year program. For us, we had a requirement, unlike in Delhi University that Priyamvada just mentioned, we had a requirement to do research during our 4-year program. So we had to do at least 2 small research projects. Otherwise, we could not complete the research, the BTech program. Okay, so that was useful. But even then, after my BTech, it was quite confusing for me because I got introduced to a broad range of subjects, and it was quite unclear for me, what should be my next step. So what I did was to narrow down my thought process a little bit. What I did was to do a 1-year research project in National Center for Biological Sciences, Bangalore, which is one of the premium research institutes in India, to expose myself a bit more to research, to try and understand which field of research I would like to enter. Okay, so and there I used to work with these 1 millimeter big worms, and I was trying to understand how neurons function in these worms, it was very interesting, and I knew that I would like to continue on trying out different model systems in the main, working with worms, fishes, etc., and to understand human function. And that's why I decided to do my PhD on worms. But then I wanted to not do my PhD in India at that point, mainly because I wanted to expose myself to what is out there. So I wanted to expose myself to research, culture, different environments and all these things outside India. So I applied to several places. I ended up in Germany. And again, this was a very interesting career transition, sort of, even though it's still in research, because I chose a lab which was predominantly physics based. Okay, so this lab was involved in understanding biological problems from a physics perspective. Okay, so this is sort of some small advice I would like to give. Try and go out of your comfort zone. Okay, so I had no physical background in physics, right? But I had a strong background in biology and engineering. But then making this leap towards going into the unknown really helped me. So for example, in the lab that I joined, there were people from 8 different countries. So they were not only from different cultures and different countries, but they were all from different disciplines. Okay, so there was a mathematician in the lab, a physicist in the lab, a computer scientist in the lab, a microscopist in the lab, and a couple of biologists, including me. Okay, so this enabled me during my PhD to do a lot of collaborative work. Okay, so that was pretty unique for me, and I had a very successful PhD in that way. So after which I was invited for several conferences and universities and so on. And I wanted to take this forward, this interdisciplinary way of dealing things, meaning collaborating with different scientists from different fields. And currently what I'm doing is working with fish embryos, trying to understand how the backbone forms, what are the physical forces involved in shaping the backbone when a baby is growing. Okay, so again, now I am collaborating with a robotics lab, with a machine learning lab, and with a physicist. Okay, so looking back, in fact, if I go all the way back to school times, this interest in numbers, okay, and following that interest, keeping that interest alive, along with whatever interest I had in biology, really helped me, in my entire transition. So again, I would really like to say that, you may not have just a single interest. You may be interested in biology plus chemistry, biology plus physics, biology plus computer science. All these can be linked with each other when you move forward, right? So, and the boundaries between disciplines are completely disappearing. In fact, you would, if you just search around, you will see that the most successful scientists are all people who have transitioned between fields. A physicist coming into biology, a biologist going to some other field, and so on and so forth. Thank you.
Wow.
So I would just like to add here one point before we move to Ranjani. So last year, as an organization, we also have a tie-up with the National University of Singapore, NUS, for the summer programs that they organize for students, especially in the field of science. And every year we have 3 cohorts, which, where students from grade 9 to grade 12 normally go and attend these summer programs, which is a 5-day summer program. And this time, because we normally have these programs in May and July and then in December, and this time we are doing it as an e-program because physically we can't go, but the scientists still want to reach out to students. And this is one way that they are helping students understand what science is all about. So I remember there is one topic where we cover about genetic engineering, and the scientist or the academicians who's who takes this session, he's a very popular one amongst the students because of the way he conveys his knowledge. Though he's a very senior professor at NUS, but still his way of reaching out to students makes it very simpler for them to understand. And if you look at his qualification, it starts from multiple PhDs, which are in the field of maths to computer science, and now he's working in the field of genetics. So, so as what you said, that it's the interdisciplinary knowledge which is becoming very, very important, and collaboration and understanding also of different fields, which will help you and not becoming, too, a straight-jacketed knowledge in the beginning stages, especially of your life. Always increases your exposure. You come out with better solutions, because you have experienced the same problem from different angles. So while you were talking about how the 8 of you from different fields probably contributed to those problems, similarly, if you as an individual also have varied experience, it really helps you, in coming up with solutions which could be probably have a better visibility.
Great. Sundar, thank you so much. I think that was very useful and very interesting also. Finally, to you, Ranjani, what made you decide for R&D for medical equipment as a career choice? I mean, any specific reason, any specific guidance on that?
Yeah, so for me, it goes back to my engineering. So I did my biomedical engineering from DY Patil, and before that, for my 11th and 12th, I had also taken PCMB just to make sure, like, even though I was stronger in biology and I was okay in physics and maths, I was very weak in chemistry. But for most of these engineering courses in bio, whatever you take, you need basics from all of these 4 subjects. So once I took biomedical, through your engineering, like we are given insight into many different subjects. Like it goes from human physiology again to immunology, like electrical and electronics is something. It's the first year in engineering is common that you have all the strong engineering subjects to be in there, and then it gets more specific in year 3 and 4. But even back then, in every summer I had made sure that I did some sort of an internship. It wasn't really an internship, it was just trying to find people who worked in specific areas that could lead to a career later and try to see what their day-to-day looked like. So I was lucky enough to have insight into one of my uncles actually has a lab where they do blood testing. So I was curious enough to just go into the lab, sit there, see how they use their instruments, how do they get the sample in, how are they testing it. And then in one of my summers, I was in Kasturba Hospital in Bombay again, where they have a huge infectious disease lab. So in there, they had cooler instruments. You could see all these big instruments, the clean rooms, and how they used to pass samples without touching it. So it gave me an insight into that. But the biggest part of it was I did my internship at Siemens in Bombay, as it was a compulsory part for our last semester in engineering. So we got an opportunity to do it either in a hospital or with the industry. So I chose Siemens there. And we used to work with all these service engineers to go into all the big hospitals there who had the Siemens MRI, CT machines, cath labs. And you could actually walk into like these huge rooms to see how these instruments are being even serviced. You could see the inside of the instrument. So even just opening up an instrument and seeing the different components inside on how it's working and how it's put together, how much thought goes into actually designing these products. That really struck a chord with me when I was doing that 6-7 month internship. So I think that was the biggest driver that I had when I applied for my master's. Then I chose regenerative medicine because that gave me an idea that you're creating again something. It gave me the opportunity to work on something that's going to it'll be an artificial implant for some person. So it was those small things that, like, when I got the job in BD, then it really drove me into liking why I did the whole R&D part. And now it's a fun day every day for me because you have a new challenge and you keep developing something new and cool there.
Great. Thank you so much. I mean, that was that was good insight in terms of what made you choose a career on R&D for medical equipment. So that was interesting.
Sorry to interrupt, but can I ask you, Ranjani, something? Since you Ranjani and Sundar, both of you, since yours was an engineering side of biology, was it compulsory for you to have maths and biology in your 11th and 12th, or was it a choice that you took by yourself, that you wanted to probably keep both these options? How was it in your if you have to go back to your school days? I know it's going reverse, but if you can just give a quick answer as to why you kept your maths and bio together in your 11th and 12th.
So for me, the driving thing there was I knew that I wanted to do engineering, even though it wasn't a biology field. And I think in most of the colleges that I had applied in Bombay, you need maths for sure. It's PCM is compulsory. And then if you have biology on top, that obviously is a great factor for you to know the basics that you're going to end up taking as biomedical, biotechnology, bioinformatics, any one of these courses. So even though math wasn't my most favorite subject, as an engineer, I have to have the basics of it. So I had to work a little hard to make sure I still had it as a part of my choice there.
Yeah, it was the same for me. In fact, so I grew up in Tamil Nadu, in Madurai, and the system is slightly different there. You had to have mathematics irrespective of which stream you choose. So either it can be physics, chemistry, mathematics, or physics, mathematics, biology, or it's physics, chemistry, biology. Sorry, you can just include mathematics in these. So different combinations, but mathematics was always there. Okay, so and the engineering entrance examination that we had to write to enter industrial biotechnology considered only physics, chemistry, mathematics. They in fact did not even ask biology. So many of the people who joined did not have any background in biology, but that was completely fine. Undergrad, you can easily pick up on biology. And initially, when you learn biology, biology is more about understanding facts and stuff. Unlike physics, where you have to have a very strong basic understanding of how things work, biology is more about facts initially, okay, unless you enter the research field and so on, okay. So for undergrad itself, that's why the industrial biotechnology field or program in Anna University did not require biology. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Good. I think the what you both have shared just now would have helped a lot of people in the audience, because I think there are questions related to subjects being taken in the 11th and 12th, etc. So I think that would have definitely helped a lot of people in the audience right now. Okay, so now moving to the next section. I mean, what we were thinking of was, there are some common questions to all the three of you all, and I will just read out the questions and give a chance to each one of you all to sort of give your responses in a very short time. So the first one is, all of you have worked and studied in different countries. What are the differences that you have noticed in Indian and international institutes? If you can be, maybe if you can give country specific answers or something like that. So, Priyam, why don't you go ahead with it, Priyamvada?
Yeah, maybe I can start and then.
Yeah. Yes, please.
So yeah, I think one of the and of course,
Priyam, your mic is I think shaking a little bit. So maybe if you can keep it constant, your voice is going up and down.
Can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, now fine. It's just going up and yeah, please go ahead.
So yeah, I think one of the differences that definitely like I felt having been part of different institutes and universities in different countries, I think is the it's the flexibility of subjects that you can, for example, pick and choose. So and of course I haven't done the same degree in different countries to be exactly able to compare, but in general I think there's a definitely, and this is something that in India we are moving more and more towards, but at least at the time that I was doing my bachelor's, it was fairly let's say fixed in terms of what subjects you had. And even in during 11th and 12th, it was much more fixed in terms of this is what it is and this is what you do to become X, Y, and Z. But now, and I think it's becoming much more different now. There are more universities that are being open about optional subjects and additional subjects, as well as companies and institutes. Like, as I think the requirements are also becoming much more flexible. So I think, I'm sure we can go into specifics of courses to, kind of compare and contrast. But in general, I think there's a trend towards more and more flexibility, which already exists in many of the European countries or in the US, where you can pick and choose, there's no problem in having a music as a subject in addition to your biology course. Whereas it was at least fairly fixed when, I was doing my bachelor's and master's. But I think that's changing, and we have more and more colleges, which is, I think, great, because really, as I said, that we all have different interests and different choices that can lead to very different careers. And as Sundar was saying, the boundaries are really blurring now between fields. It's a very exciting time in science, in biology, where there's so much crosstalk between different subjects, making up unique careers that did not exist before. So I think the education system is responding towards that slowly and steadily. And also I think more and more industries, when you go for interviews, people are more and more open to understanding, okay, it's fine if you were a medically trained person, doesn't mean that you have to be a doctor. You can still go into communications or research later or anything else. So it's becoming more and more flexible. Yeah. But I let the others continue on that. Mm-hmm.
Sundar, would you like to go ahead next in terms of what have you noticed as different since you have studied in different countries and across different institutions?
Yeah. Flexibility is definitely one thing, which Priyamvada already elaborated on. And the other thing that was quite different previously was the amount of research people used to do in their bachelor's and master's. So given lack of infrastructure in Indian universities before, there was a stark difference between how bachelor programs or master's programs were in European countries. So I have not experienced in US. Probably Ranjani can shed light on that. So in European countries, at least, bachelors and masters had a lot of research in their program. Okay, so that's in fact one of the, I did not know about all these things, but fortunately, that's one of the reasons I had chosen industrial biotechnology for my bachelor's in the first place, because there were only 2 or 3 institutes at that point of time which had a little bit of research involved in the program itself. Okay, so but now things have changed. There are a lot of institutes and universities which are having good research facilities in India as well. For example, Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, ICERs, which are called. There are about 7 or 8, and I think 3 more are opening up. There are, I think, 11 now. They all have an incredible, research training integrated into the bachelor's program. So it's called an integrated bachelor's master's program. It's a 5-year program. And in fact, so when I was doing my PhD, I was invited by the Max Planck Institute to shortlist incoming applications for the next round of PhD candidates. So I used to screen about 300 to 400 applications, PhD applications every year. And I could clearly see that institutes and universities where students were exposed even to a little bit of research or hands-on training were far ahead than others. So now this was a huge difference between India and Europe. Now it's getting much better in India, and I'm hoping that every institute and university in India will end up taking up research as a major component as part of training their students.
Ranjani, would you like to give it a shot, since you have studied both in India, Mumbai, as well as in Florida, and now working in Ireland? So what has been your experience working in different countries and studying?
I completely agree with most of the points Sundar made as well. It was the same driving force that I had when I chose for a master's in the US. I wasn't as exposed to all the other options that I had in India at that time, but with the amount of research that I had done back then, the biggest difference for me was there's not enough research work when you, if you see it as a part of your bachelor's or your master's. So when I moved to Florida Tech, the culture there is complete, like with the flexibility of your subjects, or if you want to get into research and you get an opportunity to go pitch it yourself and try to get that position. So that is something that was different, but it's great to know that it's actually changing quite a lot in India. I've not kept in touch with the most recent opportunities there. But if that gap is closing up, then that's actually really good, because that's the kind of exposure if you have in your bachelor's or master's. As a part of my job now, I do have to review resumes again, therefore hiring new graduates there. So if you have people who have done more internships or even have done research in their studies, it makes a huge amount of difference how they get the understanding of working in the industry as well. So and then if you come to Ireland, it's the same as the rest of the Europe. I would say they get a lot more exposure during their bachelor's and master's for more research, which it's a better way of learning than just reading your textbooks. That's what I've sort of seen now.
Great. So that surely was, sorry, somebody wants to
I'll just add one point here. So 2 things that you emphasize. One was flexibility of your curriculum, and second is about research within your program. So whether it was your undergrad or your master's, and in both ways, as you mentioned, that we are slowly moving towards that direction in terms of especially interdisciplinary subjects where you have more flexibility. So our in India itself, we have a lot of now liberal art universities or liberal science universities where we do have flexibility of, having, let's say, bio along with chemistry, or maybe with maths, or even if you want to have business, or maybe, writing or communication as part of your curriculum. You have the flexibility of starting from a couple of minors, which is slowly move to, your final major, which could be, biology, which gives one a flexibility to you as an individual to experience different subjects, and then finally decide, and then take a call about what you would like to do in your masters, which is more of a specific field. So undergrad, that kind of flexibility comes from, so we have a lot of new universities like, Ashoka or Kriya or Shiv Nadar or even Christ, or Ahmedabad University or Nirma University. Some of them are offering integrated courses of BSc and MSc, while some are offering, a graduation followed by your masters. And in terms of, research institute, like how Sundar, you mentioned about the ISIS and ISC, these are all research institutions which are offering either integrated program or standalone graduation and then master's program, where the focus is like ISC offers a 4-year graduation program, unlike a normal 3-year graduation program. So yes, it's challenging to get into ISC. It's challenging to get into ISC because they have a very, you have to apply through your JEE Advance or a KVPY or any of such, entrance exams. But it is equally important to know that India is also progressing in that field. And the situation that we are in right now, a lot of funds have also gone into the biotech field to bring out. Industry has, also put in a lot of money in the biotechnology companies to bring out solutions for the problem that we are facing now. So the emphasis on science and development in science, it's a very promising future for all of us. So yes, we do agree that internationally there is much more flexibility, and we'll slowly probably reach there. But in India also, we are progressing towards that side.
A quick add-on to that. So it's sort of like a general piece of advice also. You may join a department or an organization where there is not that much research going on, but make sure that you reach out to people and do internships, like what Priyamvada was also telling. It was not a requirement for her BSc program, but she went ahead and did a couple of internships which really changed the course of her path, right? So in that way, make sure to reach out to industries or labs, shadow them for a few days, try to get involved in a bit more hands-on training. And that, I can tell you, adds immensely to your CV and really puts you in a different way when you apply for further jobs or, PhDs or something. They really look for these things rather than, how much theoretical knowledge you have.
Good. Okay, now, so let's now move on to the next interesting session. This is basically the Q&A session. So in fact, what has happened is, even at the registration stage, we have had good number of students and parents who have posted their queries, even while they were registering for this program well in advance. So what we will try and do is basically to address these questions quickly. And while we are answering these questions, of course, I mean, I can already see that, a lot of us in the audience have already been asking questions in the chat box. So we will try and answer that soon, quickly. So, going forward to the questions which has already been raised at the registration stage, these are very specific questions to specific people in the panel. Okay, so Sundar, I will just start with you. So there is a question for you which says, how do you see the future of biology plus chemistry, physics, artificial intelligence, and IT relevant fields in the next 10 years from now? If you can give a quick answer to that, it'll be helpful.
Yeah. So it's a good question. In fact, when I was thinking on what are the upcoming fields and what fields are going strong, there were 3 or 4 fields which are upcoming and are going quite strong. Okay, so maybe let me elaborate for 1 minute each. So just stop me when you think I have said enough. Feel free to stop me. So one of the first fields that is quite exciting is bio-inspired design. Okay, so what do I mean by that? It's where engineers, when they make their machines, they copy biological structures. For example, they look at how fishes swim and copy that to make a submarine, and so on and so forth. So you basically mimic biological structures to build engineering machines. Okay, for one prominent example is, for example, drones are becoming very, very popular, but it has one big problem. If it crashes onto a building or something, it can get broken. Okay, how do you solve this problem? You don't have to look far, you just have to look around you at all the insects, right? So the insects keep bumping against the walls or doors and so on, but they never get injured. Right? So scientists have actually looked at this and tried to simulate the outer structure of insects and modeled it on drones to make them unbreakable. Okay, so this is an example of bio-inspired design, which is getting very, very popular in biology right now. Okay, so you can either come from an engineering background into biology or biology into engineering. So both will work for this. Okay. So the second field, which I think is coming up big time, is artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now with the advent of amazing computing technologies and cloud computing and so on and so forth, computers are at a level where they can immensely help biology. Okay, so I can give you one example of how machine learning has actually helped my own research. Okay, so for example, I work with embryos. I do high-end microscopy of embryos. I image them from several different angles now, and then I reconstruct them into a 3D ball. Okay, so the problem here is each day I generate a terabyte of data. Okay, so and if you're not good in computing, and if you do not have programming skills, if you cannot use machine learning for this, you will spend probably years to just process one movie. Okay, so in this field of image analysis and so on and so forth, artificial intelligence is playing a huge role in biology, and this is going to expand even more. Okay, so the third field I would like to mention here is bioinformatics, which is already strong. It's not an upcoming field, it's already there, it's quite strong. In fact, I will go to the extent and say that it's one of the most employable fields in biology right now. Bioinformatics is where you use your computing. Again, computers play a big role. So you use programming skills to analyze sequences of your genome. Okay, so I can probably take a genomic sequence of one of you, and I can predict whether you are going to be prone to a certain disease or not. Okay, so this is all possible, and you need the power of bioinformatics, people who are very strong in programming, but with a background in biology to help with this. Okay. The other field is going to come big is food industry. Okay, so food industry needs a lot of biologists. Here, for example, biologists help in making probiotic yogurts. Okay, so yogurts which are quite good in bacteria and so on. The other thing in food industry is lab-grown meat burgers. Okay, so if you did not know of this, please check it out. It's about how in the current world we are sacrificing millions of animals for having meat, right? So why not grow that meat, which has the same taste, same nutrients, everything, in a lab? And it's totally possible. And there are many startups now in US and Europe which are growing lab-grown meat. And this is like super cool. And this way, it not only saves all the animals, and it also helps in climate change and so on and so forth. And the final one, which I'll just very briefly tell, is probably an upcoming field. We have to wait and see. Given the current climate crisis, it's on wildlife conservation. So we need people, biologists, to come up with methodologies to track and monitor organisms which are going to become extinct or which are vulnerable, so that we can protect them in different ways. Okay? And there are again many labs which are involved in this. So maybe I'll stop there. I'll let the other panelists also to expand on their own fields, what is coming up.
So, Sundar, very quickly, because we are having a paucity of time. So there's one question which has come up again. This was specific to you, so that's why I'm taking the liberty of asking. Is it possible to pursue a career in astrobiology after getting a degree in biotechnology? Do you have any insight into this?
Yeah. So astrobiology is very niche field. You can do astrobiology after biotechnology for sure. There's no problem with that. The only thing is, what will you do after you have a course or a program in astrobiology? Okay, so a lot of people who work with astrobiology tend to work with space stations. For example, ISRO has a small astrobiology section. NASA has a huge astrobiology section. The European Space Station has a huge astrobiology section, but it's not that common as of now in India. Even in Europe and US, to my knowledge, the opportunities are not as much compared to other fields of biology. It's definitely a very exciting field to figure out what is happening. This is what I know of astrobiology.
Okay. Rita, we come to you. So there are a couple of questions which has been addressed to you directly. So there's a question which says, my daughter loves nature and says that she wants to become an environmentalist and likes biology a lot. Let me know how I shall generate more interest to her in these fields and help her understand the career options in this field of getting into being an environmentalist.
So for environmental science, as Sundar said, it's one we all really have started, at least the younger generation, if you interact with, they are becoming more conscious of how we need to do things to save our environment, and universities are also understanding that. So with that, there are a couple of universities, especially in India. Outside, yes, it's a very common field. But even in India also, we have universities like, let's say, Kriya, which offers a course in environmental sciences, a major in environmental science. We have Ashoka University, which has again a minor in environmental science. So like that, there are, even Mumbai University has recently introduced a course which was environmental science plus management together. Because it's a very broad field. What exactly would you like to do? Would you like to be a scientist and working on practices, or would you like to probably bring on management practices and work with organizations who are working in that space? So environmental science is a very vast field again. But if you are more inclined towards the conservation side and becoming a scientist, there are universities in India and internationally. Yes, we have a very, very, different kind of programs in the environmental conservation space, related with sciences and related with science plus management together. In fact, I have one of my own student who went to Canada to do a course in natural resource conservation, a bachelor's in natural resource conservation. And his interest also started with, that I'm keen to do something for the environment. So we have the scope both in India and international for this. And in case you want any specific answers about how to go about it and what should you do in your 11th and 12th, then you can connect with us and we can guide you on that.
So, I think what is happening is, even while we have been discussing these various questions which has been coming in, there is a whole flood of questions which has come into the chat box. So I would love to, it's important that I sort of pay a little attention there and, take the questions from there in also. So, one of the questions that has come in is that, somebody has said that I want to know that in 11th and 12th, do we need PCMB for any biomedical stream? anybody can answer that. I mean, I would suggest if Ranjani or Priyamvada can answer that.
I can give a quick answer
Yeah.
for that. So if you're going for biomedical engineering, PCM is, I think that's needed in most of the colleges, at least in Bombay. Biology is usually a good to have, but it's not one of the prerequisites that you would need to for the admission. But it, as a part of the entrance exams that you would give, it would have questions related to biology sometimes.
Okay.
Can I just add here? So as Ranjani said, for any of the engineering courses, bio is not a compulsory option to have. So whatever your knowledge till 10th grade, that's sufficient for you to answer some of the questions which may come in the entrance exam. But otherwise, whether it is a biotech engineering or a biomedical engineering or any of the engineering fields with bio, what you need to have is again PCM, and not B is not a compulsory option. Yes, if you want to have that option and you are interested, you know, you definitely can have that, but it's not a mandatory option from the university side in terms of admission process.
Okay. Another question, this is to Priyamvada specifically. It says, how do we go ahead and apply for TIFR for our MSc program? Can we also get enrolled, you know, soon after 12th for our graduation in TIFR? Priyamvada, if you want to just give it a shot.
So actually, TIFR only
Priyamvada, your voice is cracking. I think your microphone is shaking.
Yeah. Is it better now?
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
so TIFR actually, because it's a research institute and not an undergraduate college, it offers only courses from masters upwards. So there's masters, there's PhD, there is postdoctoral studies, which is basically after PhD when you continue to do your research. But it does not have any bachelor's courses. And for masters, it's usually through an entrance exam, and they're very selective in the sense that it's 7 to 10 people that are selected every year from around the country, who based on an entrance exam and an interview, followed by an interview where you discuss your research skills, basically of why you want to do this specific program, basically by research. They also have an integrated PhD option. So this is all after basically bachelor's, because this is a master's plus PhD integrated option, which shortens the time of a PhD and gets you, if you're very clear you want to do research, then instead of doing a master's plus a PhD and spending those 7-8 years, it actually finishes it in 5 to 6 years. So it condenses that option, but it does not offer any bachelor's courses at the moment.
Can I ask a question here? Priyam,
Yeah, please.
to you.
Go ahead.
So for you, a lot of students, when we interact with, they are not interested in research. And I think even Sundar can answer that, because they feel research is a very long drawn process. You know, it's easier to work in the industry if you move towards finances or you take anything in maths or any other field. But if you go towards the research side, they feel it's not a paying career, and plus it's a very long drawn process. So do you agree to this, or would you have any suggestion for this?
Okay, maybe I can start and then I let Sundar continue. So I think, so in terms of years, if you see, it is true. But at the same time, I think it's, so for people who do, and you know, I have a lot of friends in research who are still continuing to do research. I think what drives you to do research, and you know, I think Sundar put it very nicely, it's one of the coolest jobs out there. So if you see it as a job, it's the passion for finding that answer that's the driving force for everyone who continues in research. Now there are, you know, as we've all shared, there are several options out there. If the sort of the way of work, you know, if that's the pace or the way, if you want an alternate thing while still having the science excitement, then industry is out there. Because in industry, for example, you still have a 9 to 5 or a 9 to 6 job while still doing research, right? So there's a whole pharmaceutical industry out out there trying to find new drugs to new diseases or to old diseases, where you are still applying your research knowledge and science knowledge and biology knowledge to find out new molecules that can attack different viruses or diseases or something like this, right? So you can always, based on your aptitude, you can always do that research in a more industrial setting, or you can use that to then communicate, or make devices, as Ranjani was saying. So you can use that research for different things. But at the same time, if what industry does not maybe offer, industry in sense of pharmaceutical industry, for example, is the openness and the flexibility of questions that you can ask. So for example, if there's something I really want to understand, that how does a chameleon change its colors and what is the science behind it, no industry would pay you to, do this, find out this questions that you have inherent in you. So I think it's this passion that drives a lot of people, and the flexibility of routines and the jobs, and having the passion for teaching, which is also an essential part of being a research scientist. You get to interact and train a new generation of scientists. I think that's a pretty cool responsibility, again. So yeah, I think there's all pluses and minuses in each job, and it's all for us to choose what works best for us. Yeah, thanks.
I actually have a follow-up question to Priyamvada on, I think what Mrs. Rita also asked. If you are interested in research, but you do not want to do research, what is your option? Because I'm also curious to know what can you do, because my mind is all focused on research.
Yeah, no, so as I was saying, I think you can really apply research to a 9-to-5 job, right? So you can do this in pharmaceutical setting. You can do this in the food industry, as Sundar was mentioning. You can go do this in the cosmetics industry. So you would, be surprised to know that, I don't know, L'Oreal has a huge research unit in France, for example, where they would be, instead of testing the new cosmetics that come up on humans or on animals, you would actually use your cells and cell culture, little skin grafts that you can grow in the lab, and test the new products, new cosmetics that they're launching on them, right? So you can totally use this research knowledge, interest, your techniques that you do in the lab, to a very conventional job in some way, if that's the concern, or if that's the liking that you have in terms of a lifestyle that I would like to have, on the other hand, if this is something that you are interested in, that I want to wake up with a new question and be able to test that, I think no other job is going to help, be able to let you do that. But having your own research and your own lab and your own students to be able to come up with a new hypothesis and test it. So it's very two different shades of the same thing, leading to different things, and everything is equally important. There are jobs out there for all.
Great. Rita, there is a question which I think you need to address. It says, seeing today's crisis, are there any chances of getting a job right after my BSc degree?
So it's not about, right now in this situation, but for any kind of situation after BSc, yes, there are jobs, but people are also looking, especially the industry looks at specialists. Industry, till BSc, you are still, your degree is very generic, It's only in your master's that you focus a lot on specific topics, and industry would like to, probably get better response or better results from you when you do your master's. So it's important, and at this moment, because of whatever situation though we are in, though the pharma industry right now needs people, but there are very few pharma industries or big companies which have got this funding recently, but there are a lot of small entrepreneurs or the medium-sized entrepreneurs which are doing a lot of work, especially in this present situation of COVID. How we all heard about this company from Pune, which, made devices immediately for testing, two companies which came out with very reasonable priced ventilators. So those kind of small startups or the micro, MSMEs, entrepreneurs which are now coming out with immediate solutions and are able to give quick solutions. Those kind of companies may still look for undergrads as well, but it's also a good time for us to, especially for students, to upskill or upgrade your knowledge and move to masters, so that, because once you enter the industry, it's very difficult for you to come back and then start, studying again. So it's good that if you can at least finish your masters and then take up a job. But if you have certain circumstances which are forcing you to take up a job immediately after your graduation, then rather than looking at big industries or big companies, you should look at the medium size in, companies in the similar sector, whether it is food or pharma or, any of the medicine industry.
Well, we could go on and on and on, and we didn't realize that we have overshot our time. So our time was from 6 p.m. to 7:30, and we have already crossed a minute more than that. So I think, it's time that we sort of stop here right now. But all the questions that has come to us in the chat box, what we will try and do is, whatever we have asked here right now is well and good, and got it answered. Otherwise, we will try and reach out to each one of you all with your specific queries over the next few days. So, kindly be patient and wait for our response from our side. We will try and make sure that each of your queries are handled. Okay. Now I would I would request Rita Balachandran to please kindly address us and, share the closing remarks as far as the first episode of Meet the Masters is concerned. So Rita, over to you.
Before I start talking, I first would like to thank each one of you who has been part of this series with us. Parents, students who have, had faith and then wanted to explore this topic of bio. So thank you for being here. We have been in this journey of guiding students for the last, as an educationist, it's been 20 years for me now. But in the career counseling space, I've been involved with students for the last 7 years. We will continue to come out with new topics in this series. This is just the first beginning, and we will come up with, more. We are also open to more suggestions from you in case you're looking for any specific topics. As far as the questions are concerned, we will definitely try to reach out to each one of you if you can give answers, and we'll compile those questions and go back to our viewers who are here with us. And we will like you all to spread a word about this initiative that we have taken. Our purpose has been always to guide students, because they are all in the stages where they are still exploring their choices. They're all in the stages where they want to know the world ahead. So thank you so much for being here. Do reach out to us for any kind of counseling queries that you have. If you want to know about how to go about and how to reach this process, like the question that you asked about how to reach to, let's say, TIFR or to get into ISC, or what is the process involved and at what stages you should start with the career counseling process, so that children get better clarity. When, it was days for us, there were no career counselors, and I'm sure with Priyamvada or Dr. Sundar or with Ranjani also, it was step by step, process that they evolved over one step after another. But if we are able to guide students in any which ways, we are most open to that. So please do reach out to us. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we have a WhatsApp group where we keep sending or sharing education updates every day. So please do join that, and let's look for the next series that we will come up with soon.
Thank you, Rita. So that brings us to the closure of the first episode of Meet the Masters. For those of us who still have queries and want more guidance, of course, please feel free to connect to Rita Balachandran on the contact details that you see on the screen right now. Once again, our heartfelt thanks to our three panelists, Dr. Priyamvada Chugh, Dr. Sundar Naganathan, and Ms. Ranjani Iyer, for agreeing to participate in this event and sharing your valuable experience and knowledge. We sincerely thank each and every student and parent who are present today for your active participation and valuable presence. We will keep you posted about our next episode on an interesting subject and career choice separately. So this episode now comes to a formal end. Thank you once again, each one of you all, for gracing this occasion. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was great sharing all this knowledge.
Thank you so much, Ranjani.
And good luck.
Thanks. Thank you, Sundar.
I'll let you go.
And good luck to all. Okay.